We're going to start with the open forum, and I'll be the moderator. This has been requested because the regular moderator is having a mild form of laryngitis. So I apologize on her behalf, and I will moderate this question and answer section. So for the first time in the last 20 years of the meetings of this Smart Life Forum, you're going to have a moderator who speaks with an accent. And who's going to ask the first question? This is your chance to be the first. Who's going to be courageous? Raise your hand and ask a question. Yes.
My daughter wanted to know about dermabrasion and going to having facials and things like this. You know?
Now, I think that the open forum is to be about any topic, and you're asking me already about the skin.
Yes.
Okay, even before I talked about the skin. Now, the open forum is for anybody to ask any question and for everybody to answer it. If you're asking me now, I will start giving my lecture now, and we'll have to skip Steve's lecture, and that is not possible. So, but dermabrasion is an option for some situations. Obviously, each case is individually unique, and you cannot, without seeing what it looks like, give a person the best advice. I generally don't like dermabrasion because of various reasons, but if it is indicated and if it is the best option for that specific situation, I would not be opposed to it. There are other options too, like novodermy and other ones, you know, with collagen and with stem cells. I mean, there are all kinds of options, but it is something that has to be discussed with the individual.
Oh,
So try and ask other people. If you have an answer to her?
A little bit. I just saw a thing on the net about I guess a stem cell treatment you can get actually for it. And I think it was I actually posted a link on it on stemcellpioneers.com. I think it's under I can't remember, either new topic or one of the, you can see it on there. And I think it was originally listed on the Telegraph. If you remember the news, it's an online newsletter. And sure, it's supposed to be safer.
Right. Stem cells are the rage.
I wanted to mention that there's a movie on the internet right now for this week, and it's on GMOs, and it's a really in-depth movie, and it's free for this week. I forgot to bring the link for it, but if somebody's interested, if they give me their email, I'll send them the link.
That's by Jeffrey Smith with the Institute of Responsible Technology, and the website is www.responsibletechnology, and I'm sure you can find it there, and it is available for a few more days.
Really important topic. We have to make, especially in California, right? The voting is still going on. You have to have at least 1 million or something, and I know that it's a very important thing. So please watch and become activists in this regard.
Regarding the dermabrasion question, I've noted a lot of things about skin that relate to factors that aren't necessarily straightforward. Starting with my experience with BHT, which is an FDA-approved food preservative, way back in the 1979 to 83 time frame. I was selling it commercially. I was running a vitamin company and selling it, and it was being used by people for antiviral purposes. And this followed the initial research which was from 75 through 79, when a group of researchers started publishing these bizarre findings that BHT was interfering with viral diseases and was killing herpes in test tubes and things like this. And so all kinds of people were taking BHT. And the interesting thing that I noted was that half of the people who sent me letters about their results mentioned, oh, by the way, my skin is cleared up. My skin is beautiful. It looks 10 years younger, or this kind of thing. And it just kept happening again and again and again and again. And so over the years, I have looked at issues of how things like zinc affect skin health, and zinc deficiencies can aggravate it, and vitamin A can augment skin health. So just a little, this last weekend I was at the Quantified Self Conference, and one of the speakers was talking about raising metabolic rate and the benefits that that had on skin. So you can stimulate skin proliferation by abrading your skin and just rubbing it, and which is what basically happens when you walk barefoot. That the stress on your feet causes your skin cells underneath your feet to start growing, and you develop calluses as the skin grows faster and thicker, and it reaches a point of equilibrium where the skin is replicating fast enough that the skin wears off at the same rate that it's being generated. But the issue is not just to stimulate skin health from above, but to stimulate it from below, and working on collagen therapies and antioxidants. So I was postulating way back in the 80s that BHT was acting as a fat-soluble preservative and was stabilizing the vitamin E levels in the skin, in the dermis, and the vitamin A levels in the dermis, and that was improving people's skin health. So there's a lot of things that might be considered nutritional cosmetics that might want to be considered instead of dermabrasion.
Amen. And by the way, I have to say that I got to know Steve probably in the early 90s, thanks to his little tiny book about BHT, which, in the early 90s, I was lecturing about viral diseases, and I came across his little book, and I was incorporating it into my lectures back in the days. And then when I came here years and years later, and I got to meet him and say, well, Matt, is that the same guy that I knew back when? Somebody raised.
Just a question on dosage for VHD.
Dosage.
How much works?
Oh, in terms of skin changes, it didn't matter what the dose was. They could be taking 250 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams, and it had the same effect.
Right, and I think that Steve and I both agree that today there's a lot of new information. There are other things that you can do to help yourself, and you don't have to necessarily take a preservative, right? It was back in the days when we had partial information, and we kind of evolved, and gradually we tried to stay away from preservatives in general. Other questions?
Dr. T, I'm curious about psoriasis. Like, what is the cause, if we know one, or did somebody ask that question already, or no? And so psoriasis, and what are some of the primary or best ways to address it?
Another skin question. Since you asked me, I would say I normally just approach the psoriasis question as an autoimmune disease. And I have a whole discussion about autoimmune conditions and the foods that could trigger an increased immune reactivity, and the toxins that come from your gut, mycotoxin, endotoxin, that increase immune reactivity, all the factors that lead to inflammation in the body. There are numerous different types of toxins, heavy metals, a lot of things increase inflammation. So if the inflammation is focused in the skin area or accelerated in the skin area more than it is in other parts of your body, then it will manifest more as psoriasis. And of course, we know that it's sometimes worse in the winter and better in the summer. So in those cases, it's always nice to increase UV exposure, and for many other beneficial reasons, of course. And sometimes people go to the Dead Sea, so I recommend that they do have some salt water exposure, which is a part of our heritage. When we discuss the paleoanthropology issue in mid-January, I'll give a 3.5 or 3 hour lecture on paleoanthropology and human nutrition, meaning what is our body supposed to eat? What are we supposed to be eating according to nature? Long before the hunter-gatherers, long before we escaped the tropical rainforest in Africa. And then you'll see more or less what changes, what departures we had from that state and how they affect our body, including our immune system. If you balance your immune system, you also reduce the risk of autoimmune disease, and a lot of that is related to things like vaccination. Everybody gets vaccinated today? Raise your hand if you haven't ever been vaccinated. Nobody. Ever. I am the only one in this room that has never been vaccinated. And you know, I feel so fortunate thanks to my parents. Now I have a 2-hour lecture just on vaccinations and how they affect our immune system. And most of autoimmune disease today are triggered or at least accelerated or enhanced by the fact that we've been vaccinated, and our immune system is never going to be the same. But if you increase your cellular immunity, you can reduce autoimmune disease by simply balancing the T helper cell ratio to the point where autoimmunity is suppressed. And that's a little more in-depth than we could ask. You know. But if somebody else wants to answer that question, I'm sure that Steve has a lot to say about it.
I have a question. Where could we get additional reading about how vaccines affect the autoimmune disease?
First of all, there are quite a lot of books about how vaccines are an assault on the immune system. One of them is by a lady by the name of Schreibner. She's an Australian who has done a really good job tabulating all the research that was done. But since her, there have been quite a few others. And if you just do a search on the internet, you'll find quite a lot of researchers who will demonstrate all the different effects on the immune system that occur, even if the vaccine worked, which is also doubtful. Even if it worked, it still causes a lot of immune problem for life.
One of the things that the vaccine does is what it's intended to do, and that is to trigger an immune system reaction. And pretty much any antigen which gets presented to your system acts as a challenge in that respect, and it's oxidatively mediated. In other words, you get at the site of the inflammation, you get a shift in the redox potential, so the environment becomes oxidative, and that activates the immune system and focuses the killing power of the immune system on that site. But there's also an assault that is indirectly on that, which is the mercury in the vaccine that is typically used as a preservative that poisons your mitochondrial systems and poisons your cellular energy systems, and so your metabolic rate drops. And when your metabolic rate drops, your ability to keep your body reduced also drops. So not only are you insulting the immune system purposefully, but you're also undermining it at the same time. And so that's, I think, very well documented, those kinds of reactions that are in response to the vaccine. The thimerosal, yes. Yeah.
I usually ask for thimerosal containing vaccines. Yeah. Just kidding.
Yeah. The question about psoriasis, there's a huge amount of literature about UV on that, and I would suggest that it suggests that vitamin D3 is potentially a therapeutic agent for psoriasis. This has been just, slightly investigated, and it seems that the people who are doing it at 50,000 units a day, 15,000 units a day, somewhere in that kind of range, are getting positive results. But I had an interesting report also at the Quantified Self Conference in one of the groups. A person who is actually kind of an unofficial client of mine had significant psoriasis problems, and she took a supplement called Anadablock, which is an anti-inflammatory extracted from tobacco, and it just shut it down, and her psoriasis went away in a matter of a week, and it stayed away the entire time. So this issue of inflammation can be, on some levels, extremely focused in ways that we don't necessarily understand. So this is a brand new antioxidant that's out there. There's some really intriguing research about it, and this one person had a hyper response to that particular one.
I'm so happy that Steve is here, because as a narrator or moderator, I'm not supposed to give all the answers. So thank you, Steve. And by the way, even if it is thimerosal free, there's always an adjuvant in your vaccines. And adjuvants are what is put into the vaccine to stimulate the immune response so that the vaccine can become effective. So the thimerosal has the mercury in it, supposedly as a preservative, but in reality it's designed to be your adjuvant. But they cannot admit that because people will say, what, they put mercury intentionally? So they call it a preservative. But if you are looking at thimerosal-free vaccine, they will still have aluminum as an adjuvant, and your immune system will react dramatically as a result. So you will then be exposed to all kind of other antigens at the same time that you've been vaccinated, and you become reactionary, immunologically speaking, you'll become reactionary to just about anything you've been exposed to at that time. So there are a lot of mechanisms by which the vaccine is insulting the immune system.
They mentioned a long time ago some drops you could put in your eye that would resolve cataracts, and I forgot what it was, NAC or vitamin C, or does anybody remember?
Anybody? Carnosine. Zinc, maybe zinc carnosine.
No, they had L-carnosine.
The L-carnosine, okay. Yes.
Acetyl L-carnosine
Mm-hmm.
or fancy drops.
Acetyl L-carnosine. Okay. Is 20 minutes over or? 2 more minutes. One more question? Yes.
There's a book out called Dr. Mary's Monkey, and it talks about the polio vaccine. It's a very fascinating book, and it talks to you about what the effects have been over long range taking the polio vaccine back in the 50s, and it is not favorable.
Right, he's talking about the SV40 virus, which they found in the monkey kidneys. Well, and they didn't even know about it because you cannot find anything that you don't know that you have to look for. So it might take 30 years before they find out, and that virus happens to cause brain cancer in humans. And yeah, but it takes 20 to 30 years to convert into a cancer, so it's kind of hard to make the connection. And when you get vaccinated today, you don't know what is in that vaccine, and nobody knows until 20, 30 years later. There's a big delay factor here that we should be careful. Even the FDA, believe it or not. I mean, they should really, we expect them to know. What happened to those who refuse? Oh.
We have to wear masks before within 3 feet of a patient if we don't take the vaccine at UCSF. But Cal Pacific, I think, is being more forceful on the issue. Stanford, too. I think it's required at 80s. A flu vaccine.
I have a question. How many people know about M2PK test? And can you tell us something about it if there's anybody here that knows about it?
No. No, different. If nobody can answer, I could answer the question, obviously, but M2PK is M2 pyruvate kinase, which is a test that's done in the stool looking for a special isoenzyme of pyruvate kinase. Pyruvate kinase is a very important enzyme in the energetic system of every cell in your body, and there is a separate type of pyruvate kinase called M2. M2 pyruvate kinase is normally seen where cells are extremely stressed, inflamed, and carcinogenic. When a cell is actually changing to cancer cell, its energetics change dramatically, and that's when you see that type of enzyme expressed by that cell, and it will then come into your colon if it is occurring in the colonocytes, the cells lining the colon, and then you could tell from that by testing your stool if you have colorectal cancer, rather than doing the dubious pleasure of colonoscopy. So that is something everybody should know, and that test is not widely known in the United States because of the stronghold of the FDA and the medical industrial complex on business as usual. It's testing for colorectal cancer, although if you have severe inflammation in colorectal mucosa, that inflammation could also lead to secretion of M2PK. So you have to do a differential diagnosis between the two, although severe inflammation of the colorectal mucosa almost inevitably leads to colorectal cancer over time. So it's really important to know. And out of about 500 patients that I've tested with M2PK over the last 7 or 8 years, about 80 were positive for M2PK, but after I put them on a program for 2 or 3 months, reducing the inflammatory components of the gastrointestinal tract, improving the digestive and their microflora and other things, their M2PK became negative within 2 or 3 months. It's very easy to reverse early phase colorectal cancer, and it's better to find it when it's really early. And it's easy to do. You just have to do this very unusual act of pooping. How much it costs? About $125 or $145, depending if you do it with a complete panel of the digestive system or just by itself.
If I may for a moment speak about mandatory vaccination, there is a bill about to be passed, and you'll probably want to talk to Governor Jerry Brown in the next few days, and I don't know the exact name, but I think it's AB 2109, and it has to do with passing a bill that will make it mandatory for all children to be vaccinated in this state. So if you could please speak to Jerry Brown or his associates in the next couple days, they'll be voting on this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, if you could add it to the same ballot about the GMOs at the same time, GMOs and vaccines. So our 20 minutes are up. I thank you for the participation, and should I invite Steve, or are you going to invite him? Okay.